Hey guys, it's Ramey Outdoors, and today we're going to crack open to another lure review. This is going to be the first one that's going to be uploaded on my YouTube channel, but I usually tend to do these a little bit more on my TikTok channel. So if you're not following that, search up Ramey Outdoors on TikTok and go send me a follow today. But today, we're going in with the Z-Man Hellraizer. And this is going to be kind of your new kid on the block. He's only been out for, I believe, about a year or so now, and in terms of topwaters, there's not really much like him out there, at least. You've got that pencil-like design, double treble hooks, and you've got kind of this weighted blade design in the back. That's going to create that kind of choppy, walk the dog style motion, but it's also going to create that burring vibration motion that you also get out of a chatterbait. So let's kind of dive into what I like about it and kind of what I don't like about it and what I think about it so far after fishing with it for a little bit. All right, so I've got a couple of notes on my phone right here. Basically, what I kind of think of the Hellraizer so far is that I think that it fills this nice little niche in between a whopper plopper and a walking bait. I don't think it's ever at any point going to like take over one or the other. I do think that they're all going to fill their own little spots, but I think that this is kind of that in-between child between the two of them, because it is a very simple retreat, like cast and retrieve style bait, but it also has that kind of walking, twitching motion with this like insane kind of like plopping action. So it's like that kind of in-between child, if you will. I do think that there's going to be kind of an absolute like specific situation where this is going to be absolutely shredding on topwater, but I don't think it's necessarily going to, you know, be an all the time user. I definitely think that this is more of a seasonal lure. For example, if the fish aren't inherently wanting a topwater bite, they're definitely not going to go for this. But if they are wanting a topwater bite, but they're not necessarily wanting to chase all that much or go for something that's particularly aggressive, I don't think that'll work too much, at least in the favor of this bait. So I think that there's more of like a specific situation in which this might shine. Something that I have noticed after fishing with this for a couple of times is that it is an absolute pond scum magnet. If you are in any way around any kind of heavy structure, like some grass lines or even some pond scum, definitely stay away from that, because this is definitely some type of mechanism. And if this gets gunked up, basically that cast and that retrieve is going to be there's no point in having it. You might as well go ahead and reel all the way in and go ahead and clean off your lure and cast somewhere else. That's not something that is going to work well in favor for this lure. And just like any kind of lure with double treble hooks, that's always going to be the case. So let's kind of move into like what I think is like more like the pros and the cons. Okay, so this is kind of like the pros versus the cons. Overall, I do think that this is kind of like a feast or famine bait. That's just kind of a thing with this. But the first thing that I do like is that it is a bait that does float. There we go. So here's kind of a little bit of a correction on this actual piece. It does not float. I know I said that earlier in the video. I'm gonna put like some annotations. It doesn't float. I thought it did. It does not. You know, contrary to like, let's say a buzzbait that does not float, which is actually my least favorite topwater. Sorry for you buzzbait fanboys out there. I'm just not a big fan of it. It is rear weighted and it's a pencil shaped design. So that's gonna make for cutting through wind, and the fact that it's also rear weighted is gonna make it really easy to cast this thing. And anytime I've been trying to cast this thing, I just absolutely bomb it out across the water, which you'll see like down on the chest cam whenever I'm actually fishing with it. You can cast this thing a country mile. It's very easy for beginners. So one of the big things that I don't inherently like about some topwaters, like you have a popping frog or you have a walking bait, is that they usually have some kind of introductory period. You know, with a walking bait, you have to be able to twitch your rod really effectively. And if you're not able to do that, then you're not really gonna get much done. So that's the first big thing with these with the Hellraizer that I really like. Next is that it's very consistent and doesn't tangle with itself very much. That's like one of the biggest things with the Hellraizer that I really like, is the position of these treble hooks. That they just barely are out of reach of this eyelet and they don't get tangled with each other. So you're very rarely gonna get your line wrapped around this while you're casting. It has a very high hookup ratio. that's something I definitely like, but that's gonna come from these dual treble hooks, but also because most of the action's coming from the rear. So that's where these fish are mostly going to be striking. You don't need specialized gear. You can definitely throw this on basically anything. Like for example, I'm gonna be throwing this on a medium heavy fast with a moderate gear ratio bait caster, and it feels completely fine. If I was throwing this on just a straight medium or a medium heavy extra fast, it would be completely fine. Now, you don't want something with a ton of backbone because it is going to rip the hooks out of the fish's mouth very easily if you're applying too much pressure. So I guess that's the only specialization that you would actually need. And that kind of falls it up for like the pros or the things that I like about this bait. Next, let's just kind of go for like, it's a thing. First off, you know, like I said at the beginning, it's very feast or famine, but also the fact that it's a very, very thumpy topwater. And what I mean by that, it's creating a lot of racket. So that's what kind of follows in with that feast or famine, is you need those fish to be in a very specific mood to want to eat this. And that's where I think that like this bait does have a little bit of a shortcoming, is if those fish are not in a very specific mood, they're not gonna want to eat this. So kind of the cons in terms of this is, and I kind of spoke on this with like the overall design, is that it is a gunk magnet. Anything that's like got any kind of like pond scum or anything like that, it is just going to devour, like, and get caught up in this, like nonstop basically. And to kind of follow off that, it's an open water lure. Just like a walking bait or a whopper plopper, you're not gonna wanna throw this thing near weeds. And you're gonna kind of I'm gonna kind of showcase this whenever I'm casting, and to where you can kind of see, if you throw this thing near any kind of scum, it's just gonna eat it up. And it's gonna get caught in the mechanism and you're not gonna have a good time. It has a niche use case for advanced anglers, specifically for advanced anglers. So for me, I would rather throw a walking bait over this for a vast majority of the winter. For the springtime, I'm probably going to be throwing a frog, because the frog spawns there. You're going to have a bunch of fish that are all up in the grass, and that's where this lure can't go. A whopper plopper is not going to be as loud of a lure. So, you know, fish that are a little bit more finicky are going to be able to eat this a little bit better. And then lastly, this is kind of like the last con to kind of come around this. This is definitely going to be a seasonal lure. Like, for example, we're in November right now when this is being recorded. This is actually November 27th. So I don't know when this video is actually going to be out. But this is not the time of year to be throwing this, at least from my experience. I have caught a couple of fish on a couple of different fishing trips with this. But it is not, you know, constant smacks, constant eats, like, you know, with a walking bait for topwater, or with a whopper plopper during this time, or even with a topwater popper, which is going to have a much smaller form factor. Who knows? I might get down on the chest rig and catch like 6 or 7 fish out here. Who knows? I'm filming this before I fish with it down on this little trip. But this is definitely going to be a seasonal lure. I could see this really eating really well in that kind of like mid-spring, like during spawn, or even pre-spawn or post-spawn. Maybe not so much in the summer, but definitely before we start having pond and lake turnover, I could definitely see this thing being a heavy hitter in the fall as well. So just like, you know, let's say deep diving crankbaits, I don't see very many applications for this lure, but I definitely think that it fills a very specific niche where you're like, oh, I need something that kicks up, gets really aggressive for these like really aggressively biting fish, but I'm not gonna wear my shoulder out walking it constantly. And that also is like a consistent moving bait. So if it fills that niche and it's during that time, it is absolutely going to eat, and it is just going to be a beast of a lure. So enough for my yap session. Let's go ahead and get down on the water, and let's do a little bit of a showcase on how this bait actually moves. All right, guys, so we're down here on the water now, and we're going to go ahead and start kind of going over that Z-Man Hellraizer a little bit. So first thing that I'm going to be kind of saying is I'm throwing this on a medium heavy fast. So I would probably recommend some kind of medium or medium heavy, moderate or fast. I definitely don't really see this being something that has an application for like a slow or anything like that. but let's kind of go through this. I would definitely throw this on either fluorocarbon or mono. I'm actually throwing this on mono right now. And why? Because I can. So I feel like mono kind of gets a little bit hated on in the fishing community. So time to give it a little bit of limelight. So next thing we're going to kind of come out here, and first thing that we're going to kind of come up with is we're going to try and make some kind of like long cast, necessarily like parallel to some kind of cover, but still staying away from it, because we don't want for, you know, to get gunked up, because that's one of the big problems with this lure. If you get any kind of like, let's say like gunk or anything like that, and I'll show you in a minute what I mean, is that it will get absolutely devoured by that pond scum. So let's go ahead and make some kind of parallel cast to some kind of structure. And next, we're just going to start reeling at like a nice, conscious, easy pace. And you can kind of see that it's having that like kind of twitching motion. It's not necessarily like a straight retrieve like that whopper plopper is, but it's definitely like creating like a lot of commotion. So I'm going to kind of drag it through the grass a little bit, just so you guys can see what I mean. And that was just a couple of inches worth of grass, but you can kind of see both of those treble hooks dug in and grabbed about as much pond scum and gunk as possible. And at least it's easy to clean up. But in terms of castability, let's go ahead and get you guys turned on over here. Let me make sure I can actually showcase this. Yeah. So this pond is about, I want to say, maybe about 40 yards or so. And I can just about hit the other side relatively easily. And you can kind of see that nice, consistent walking back and forth action. And when I say that this is just a, like when they call this thing a Hellraizer, they really do mean it. Like it absolutely raises hell. So let's go ahead, now that we're kind of out and, you know, just about, let's see if we can get some fish catches. So see you on the flip side. That is the patent pending Ramey Outdoors grass jumping technique. Oh, I got a big one. Not really, it's just grass. And a lot of it. And I mean, a lot of it.